In the mid-1800s, the journey to America was long and difficult. Immigrants would wait for a steam or sailing ship to take them. Poor immigrants would travel on ships that were making their return voyage after having brought tobacco or cotton to Europe, often waiting at the dock for weeks, until the below-deck space was filled to capacity. These ships were built for cargo, not for passengers. Conditions aboard these ships were terrible. But the rich farmlands of America's Northwest Territory beckoned. So they left Europe aboard a ship bound for New York. The voyage would take between 30 and 60 days, depending on the wind and weather. Since it took about a month for ships to bring supplies from America to Europe, people were desperate, and ships were horribly overcrowded, with each passenger having about 2 to 4 square feet of space. Lice and rats were prevalent, and there was little to no food. Because these ships were never meant for passengers, below deck also had zero ventilation. Between 10 and 20% of those who left Europe would die on board these ships. They arrived in New York City in late October 1847. And then, from New York, the immigrants traveled over 300 miles more, to the town of Buffalo, where they waited again to board another ship, for the last leg of their journey to Wisconsin. After some time, on November 11th, they found passage on a new ship, a steam-driven propeller named Phoenix. The Phoenix lay at her dock in Buffalo, New York, taking on the last of her cargo of coffee, molasses, hardware and chains, as well as hundreds of passengers. This was her last scheduled voyage of the shipping season. Sadly, the Phoenix was never designed to carry so many passengers. Only 25 of the American passengers enjoyed cabin space. The Dutch immigrants were crammed anywhere they could find room. Of the 300 souls on board, only 50 were American, the rest, maybe as many as 200 to 250, were immigrants, mostly from Holland. Although a land route was available for foot and wagon travel, most immigrants considered the water route through the Great Lakes to be both safer and easier. From the beginning, this journey was plagued by misfortune. Under the capable hand of Captain Benjamin G. Sweet, the Phoenix encountered tremendous seas on her westward journey through Lake Erie. As they approached Fairport, Ohio, on November 13, 1847, heavy seas knocked Captain Sweet off his feet, badly bruising his knee. The pain was so severe that the captain would be bedridden for the remainder of the trip. First Officer Watts, a veteran Great Lakes sailor from Cleveland, took on the role of acting captain for the remainder of the voyage. The storm was unrelenting. Fighting howling winds and great mountains of water smashing into the ship. Captain Sweet gave the order to seek shelter and wait out the weather. 2 days later, it cleared enough for them to sail and the trip was underway again. Unfortunately, this would not last long. A few hours after setting sail, the weather turned foul again. As the vessel struggled south down the eastern shore of Wisconsin, excitement aboard the ship grew. The immigrants realized that once they reached Manitowoc, they had only a short journey to Sheboygan. The Phoenix carried supplies for Manitowoc and needed to replenish their own fuel supply. The captain gave orders to lay over for a few hours until the wind died down. At 1 a.m., when the weather eased, Watts blew the ship's whistle, which rallied the crew aboard, this time, heading to Sheboygan, just 25 miles to the south, the last leg of a months-long journey for the more than 200 Hollanders aboard the Phoenix. The firemen kept the boilers stoked and the fires hot. And they were making great time, as the lake was finally calm, with no wind. With the lights of Sheboygan glimmering just 5 miles to the west, nearly all of the passengers were asleep. Those who weren't, were anxious for their journey, of nearly 4,000 miles to be over. Sadly, most of them would not make it to land. Around 4 a.m., smoke was seen in the engine room, and the chief engineer raised the alarm. The boiler had become red hot due to a lack of water, setting fire to the ceiling, woodwork, and firewood stacked all around it. At first, the flames seemed manageable and caused no great concern. But suddenly, the flames began to billow from the engine room. It was spreading, and becoming very apparent that the ship was in serious trouble. Captain Sweet was awakened, and he immediately ordered that all fire hoses be put into action against the raging flames. The helmsman was ordered to make for the shore with all possible speed. Next, the passengers were organized into bucket brigades. Making things worse, the ship had only 2 small lifeboats, with room for 20 people each. There were nearly 300 on board. Regardless, these 2 boats were lowered. Although arguing to remain with his ship, the injured Captain Sweet was forced into a lifeboat by his crew. A young teenaged girl and her family approached one of these boats, and she was reluctantly allowed to board. As the already overloaded boat pushed away, her 2-year-old sister was thrown down to her by her parents. This boat already held 21, some of the cabin passengers and a few immigrants. The other boat held 22 more. These 45 people, and the 3 others found, would be the only survivors of the disaster. Back on the Phoenix, the passengers could only hope that someone on shore, or perhaps another vessel, might see their plight and send assistance. But with each passing moment, hope turned to despair. They began tearing apart anything that might float, and tossing these improvised lifeboats overboard. Those who managed to find something to float with succumbed to hypothermia. On shore, in Sheboygan, the flames were noticed aboard a steamboat called the Delaware, but it took nearly 90 minutes to get enough steam to even leave the dock. By the time they arrived, the upper works of the Phoenix had burned almost to the waterline. They would find only 3 survivors, an engineer, the ship's clerk, and a passenger. The Phoenix had been launched 18 months earlier, and now she was a burnt-out smoking ruin. Only a small portion of her forward cabins remained. Captain Tuttle, and the crew of the Delaware, took the burned-out hull in tow, and headed into port. It was now nearly 6 a.m. As dawn broke across the lake, wagons were sent up the lake shore, looking for survivors. About 7 miles north, they found the 2 lifeboats, and a pitiful group of survivors, who were quickly taken back to the city. Of the 45 or so survivors, only 25 of them were Dutch immigrants.